all about writing with Ben and Sara.
Welcome to All About Writing, the podcast that covers everything about the world of writing from the inside out. This is episode 33, part 6 of our series on getting started. I'm Sara, here with my co-host Ben, who is an award-winning, best-selling author and ghostwriter, editor, and publisher.
And I'm Ben, here with my co-host Sara, who is an award-winning, best-selling author, screenwriter, editor, and TED Talk presenter. And today, we're going to talk about writing what you know. This is a bit of advice that many people will tell you. When you're first talking about writing, I want to be a writer. What should I write about? People say, well, write what you know. So what does that mean? What does it mean to write what you know? There's a couple of different ways we can approach this, but one way I'm going to approach it is just to say this, that if you're writing about a topic which is real, in other words, if you're not writing fantasy or science fiction, but you're writing something that is real, just remember that some of your readers are experts in this topic. So you want to make sure that what you're saying is at least vaguely correct. So if you don't know anything about it, then you might want to pick another topic. No, I'm kidding. Okay. But how do you
Fictionalize
decide?
it.
Yeah. What do I know? I don't know. What do I know? So how do you approach that? Like, how do you answer that question about writing what you know? Sara, what do you think?
I think the first thing when I think of that advice is write your experiences. So that means if you had trauma in your childhood, write a character or a protagonist that tackles that issue, maybe cathartically for you, therapy for you, to write this out and to create a magical resolution that you wish had happened in real life. Or, and this is actually one of my cardinal rules, and I try and do it except for when it's really expensive or dangerous to do it. But I write about places I physically have gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to write about places I've never been. I do it sometimes depending on the topic, but it's very rare and it's usually under duress. Like it's really expensive to fly to Turkey right now. And there's a war going on around there and the plane might get shut down. There's things. I think, but I think of write what you know, write what you have experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. Things like, places you've been, that's great. If you start there, if you're writing contemporary or even historical fiction or nonfiction, if it's a place that you know well, then your knowledge will just ooze out as you write. You won't even have to work at it. You just know, I know that corner store was right there at that intersection and it was across the street from that store. You just know this stuff. So that can help a lot. When we think about professions, like what have you done? And maybe you've had a really interesting life, and that's really cool. You can draw on your experiences, or maybe you've had a totally normal life, like most of us do, and you don't. Well, I've never actually hung from the skids of a helicopter as it flies over the city, so can I write about that? Because I don't actually know what it feels like to hang from the skids of a helicopter. Well, yes and no. Some of the stuff that we write about, nobody's done. So you can just use your imagination and figure it out. But for the majority of it, you do want to lean on what you've experienced. For example, I write military sci-fi. And so I write about a military that is based in the future. So obviously I've never been to space, and I've never used the weapons that they use, and I've never seen the planets that I'm making up, right? I don't know any of that, but I did serve in the military for a long time, and so I know how the military culture works. I know how the military talk to each other. I know how the different ranks interact with each other, how the different services have rivalries with each other. That I can take from my real experience and I can put it into a fantastic setting. So I'm still writing what I know. I'm writing about a real thing, which is military culture. I'm just putting it in the stars. And again, nobody's been to the stars. so nobody can tell me I'm wrong. So that part of it I'm safe with. But the important part of the story, the characters, the relationships between the characters, the stuff that makes the story really good, that is based on reality. So there's an example of how I was able to take something that I know, put it into somewhere that I wish I knew, which was outer space, and bring the two together. I put the emphasis on the characters, which I do know, and used the outer space as just sort of the window dressing to make it cool. Because, I was 4 years old when I saw Star Wars, and that was the end of it. Everything is cooler if it's in space.
But I think not only is that a perfect example, but then that dives me into my next uh kind of topic on this is not only just your experiences, so like your military experience, right? But the people you know and your personal like your personal experience, but your personal self is also fodder for writing what you know. You might have crazy aunts that will be perfect to write a story about or to have as peripheral characters. You might have had, a really interesting career or life that you can pick and choose little things from to put inside your characters to make them more realistic or to give them real life problems or real life personality traits. We all have people in our lives that are kind of similar. Like, when you start exchanging stories about like that one, second cousin who always does XYZ at the family reunion, and everybody starts going, oh, yeah, there's someone in my family like that. And so then you're starting to automatically create characters people can relate to who are reading your book. And that's another way to use writing what you know. With a twist. Obviously, you don't want to use your second cousin's name. Or make it really obvious it's them, because when they're reading the book, they'll be like, I feel like you wrote about me. But so it's more than just even experiences. I think it's the people you know, the people you've gotten interacted with, interactions you've had, or feelings even that you have had.
Yeah.
That counts.
Yeah. And very often you might think, okay, what people do I know who I can use as characters? Well, you'll think of your friends, sure. But it's often way more interesting to think about the people that you hate.
Yeah.
Remember that boss you had, that first boss you had? Oh, what a great villain that person would make. And that villain in your story can get their comeuppance that they never got in real life. Oh, there could be a little bit of revenge fantasy going on here if you want with your writing, but people who are mean, people who are self-centered, like all these negative qualities, they do make interesting characters. And you can certainly use a person that you knew who you didn't like and use them as inspiration to create a character, usually a villain. But sometimes, if you really go a long way, you can go, why was that person the way they were? I didn't like them at all. But there was probably a reason why. Let me explore that. And you might even wind up with a hero who is based on a person that you hated, which can make it for really interesting writing.
Well, I think that that's the fun part about doing this is you get to explore human nature and people you know. I mean, and I know I've used people who I just go, I can't understand how they could be so self-absorbed or so self-conscious or have such little self-worth or self-confidence, and then that makes them into this kind of either nasty person or I've even had characters where people go, I don't understand why they made the decisions they did. Like that was like those that I can't connect with those decisions, even though I like the character. I can't connect with the decisions, and it's like, yet they don't question the why. They know why that character made those decisions. And I actually remember speaking in front of a group of people at one point about one of my books, and they kind of were befuddled about one of the main characters, and I said, yes, but don't you have people in your life who are like that? And they all were like, yeah. Like it does create really a great if you can really draw on the on relationships or experiences you had interacting with other people, even if they're someone you don't know well, but there was something about them. That's I mean, and a lot of times, characters carry this story even when the plot gets a little wishy-washy. You can carry a
Hmm.
wishy-washy plot if you have really interesting characters.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Now, for plots, there is a way that you can explore that if you know about real events, that like a
Mm.
really fascinating event And if you've studied it or if you lived through it, but even if not, if you've read about it, you've talked to people, you've learned about it, a fascinating event that maybe nobody in the world really knows about, you can take it and you can adapt it and say, I know this event inside out. I really understand why it happened. I'm gonna I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna adapt it and make it into something that I want it to be. It might be a straight up fictionalization of the actual event. That's very popular, historical fiction like that. Or you might do what I do and put it in a different time or a different place and say, I'm not gonna just take the event as it happened, but I'm going to take some of the elements of it or take the essence of it and I'm going to adapt it to where I'm going to be. But if it's something that you know really well, then you can take that and you can adapt it. So that can be your plot from based on a real event.
That's true, whether it's historical or something that really happened in your life or yeah, exactly, exactly. I wanna talk a little bit too, something else that was on my list about writing what you know,
Hmm.
and this one is actually kind of, um, maybe, we've talked about, show, don't tell, but and this feeds into that a little bit, but when you use the 5 senses,
Hmm.
show what you know.
Hmm.
And you can tell even what you know, but you're kind of showing without realizing you're showing when you use the 5 senses to write what you know. And I may have spoken of this in the past, but I use it as it's such a perfect example. When I write historical fiction, my characters are women. They wear corsets, they wear dresses, they wear petticoats. They have to wear high buttoned, things and long sleeves in the heat of summer. And so as a reenactor, I specifically like to dress up because I can get the feel for is a corset, are you mobile in a corset? Turns out, yeah, you really are. Like
Hmm.
it was the bra of the, 16, 17, 1800s that it was more comfortable than some of the stuff we had in the 90s. Like it was and but then, by the end of the day, like the weight of all of that material on your hips
Hmm.
it aches, and
Hmm.
that's why they invented kind of some of those bustles because it distributed the fabric from your hips because your hips would ache so much. And, and just kind of I'm able to speak so, um vividly to some of those little details, and even though they might be scattered here and there, they make all the difference in the writing because I'm able to truly describe some of those things. So, opposite of what you were saying where it's like nobody knows what it feels like to you know hang from the bottom of a helicopter other than, stunt doubles on TV shows. um we all have our 5 senses. So we know what things smell like. We know what things sound like. We know what we've seen with our eyes and what we've felt and touched with our hands. And those kinds of sensory things can really add a lot of sparkle to a manuscript. And you can use as much of your real life experience as possible to do so.
Yeah,
And that's always at your disposal.
absolutely. And you may need to dig a little bit, like if let's say you wanted to write a historical fiction based in the 13th century in and around a cathedral. Well, you may not have access to a cathedral, but you can probably find a building made of stone not too far from you just to go and what does that smell like? What does the stone smell like? What does it feel like? Is there sort of a coldness to it? You can find something similar and take a guess, and
Yeah.
you'll probably be right, and that'll give you that, like you said, that those senses that you can. What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What's that sense in the air? That's the kind of detail which will convince your reader that, oh wow, you are an expert at this. You made that cathedral come to life. Even if you've never actually stepped foot in one. So
Yeah.
which sort of leads me to, what do you do if you want to write about something that you genuinely don't know anything about? Well, the answer is research. It's totally okay to research stuff. If you're interested in something, but you've never actually done it, you can read, you can watch YouTube videos, you can learn about it. And that's totally okay because as an author, you can take in the information, you can process it, you can use your imagination, and you can bring it back out again. A thing that I have with my science fiction writing is I do try, well, sometimes, with one series anyway, try to stay as close to the laws of physics as I can. If you're a fan of my space pirates, okay, this does not apply to that at all. Never mind. But for the other writing, I really try. And I find it fascinating to read up on the latest on physics and cosmology and what are the latest theories. I am not a scientist, right? I could not do the math. And if ever I read one of those books on the latest science, I hate it when they actually show me an equation because they're trying to prove to me why what they're telling me is true. For me, it's just vomit on the page. A whole bunch of letters and numbers and whatever. I don't care. Just tell me what it is. Tell me what it means. And so I was able to incorporate quite a lot of cutting edge physics into my books, not even being a physicist, because I actually did the research and I read a lot and I really tried to understand it. And yeah, I took the actual real theory and I moved it a little bit into fiction, but I was still as loyal as I could be to the physics, despite getting a 57% in my first year physics course at university and never going back.
That's true, though. I think we do need to give people the, I don't want to say the permission because it's not up to us, but you should give yourself permission to write what you don't know and understand that that just is going to take more time. I mean, heck, I speak of wearing the clothes and stuff, but I've been working on a book now for almost 2 years. 2 years. Oh, that's sad. It feels so less. Um, but the amount of research, I'll probably never have an idea of what it was like in the mid 1500s in Italy because one, it wasn't Italy yet. Like it was a whole bunch of city states, and the time period is not replicatable no matter how many times I go and play dress up or I go and visit some of these well-known cities and buildings. I will never be able to capture the essence of the time period.
Mhm.
So I can do all the research so I know what they were wearing and what they were eating and everything like that and what their money was called. But the rest of it is imagination. And so I think, you do hit a threshold where you're like, okay, I've absorbed as much information and taken copious notes on this subject that I'm clearly very passionate about because I'm putting all this time into it. And now I'm just going to start writing. And that's what I would recommend someone do. At some point, just be like, I've osmosised everything I can possibly hold. I'm going to burst if I can't start writing. Then start writing. You'll still
Yeah,
maybe have to go back and research things, but that's okay at that point.
yeah,
You are
yeah,
writing what you know at that point, really,
mm,
because you've researched.
yeah. Research as much as you can and try to make things just as real as you can. Uh, an example that you and I discussed not too long ago, Sarah, about a potential writing project is okay, we want to write contemporary in the United States. So, what city should we base this in? And we thought, well, you know what? New York. Why? Because everybody's seen New York on TV and movies. And even if you've never been to New York, you can feel like you've been just because it is so well recorded. And there's an example of something that, yeah, maybe I've never been there. I have once, but even before I'd been, it was still a place that I could imagine that I was there. And I feel like I know what New York is like. So there are some things out there that are just they're so well recorded that you as an author can grab them and say, "Yep, I think I can, I can make myself as if I've been there." So just an example.
That's a great one. Yeah. Yeah, I do remember us choosing it because we're like, everybody knows New York. It'll feel familiar.
Hmm.
And I think that that's true. There are some kind of tried and true, group think experiences that everyone would know it. So you can write what you know only because it is so iconic.
Yeah,
Um, so that's
yeah.
that's a really good
Yeah,
point.
and for you, the author, dear listener, you need to choose what are you writing. If you want to write something that's approachable to everybody, something iconic like New York, you've got that angle. Um, if instead you're like, nope, I'm gonna go Fargo, and I'm gonna write a whole mystery series based in rural Wisconsin. I can guarantee you almost nobody knows what that is like, but You know,
Except for me. No, I'm kidding.
if you know it, you could bring it to life, and you could create a whole new environment that no one else knows, as long as you, the author, know it. You know, so Sarah, I will await those mysteries based in rural Wisconsin.
Yeah, right. No, but I think that that's a great ending, last thing to leave our writers with is in the end, no one is you. And so you are going to write what you know, and what you know will not be replicatable by anybody else because your life, your experiences, your senses, the people and the interactions you've had, the places you've experienced in a certain time in your life, no one else will have had the same. And so in a way, inside of you already have a blueprint for a book that no one has ever written before. And I think
Absolutely.
that's something to take away from the Write What You Know, and go, the world is your oyster.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yay. All right. Well, then that's our show for today, everyone. Hope that this was as fun for you as it was for us. I had a good time with this one. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of these fun chats. And feel free to leave a review. We really appreciate them. We get really excited when we see them. So it does help us a lot. If anyone is looking for help getting their book ready for the world and making sure it feels like you wrote what you knew and you didn't miss a lot of research in the process, we recommend our friends at Cascadia Author Services, and you can find them at cascadiaauthorservices.com. And don't forget, you can find Ben at bennettrcoles.com as well as on Facebook and Instagram.
And you can catch up with Sarah at sarahdahlman.com and on Instagram. Thanks for joining us today. Please reach out if there are any topics you'd like us to cover, and we'll see you again when we next chat all about writing.
This has been All About Writing with Ben and Sara.